What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is the Complete Sinner's Guide. I'm your host, Tyler Fowler, and with me, as always, my co-host, Mr. Joshua Davison and Noah Chalaya. What is going on, gentlemen? How y'all doing this weekend? Or this week? Weekend.
I'm doing all right, bud.
Things are going great.
Right on, man. So anything new with you guys? Noah, you haven't chatted with us for a little bit. Last week you came on, right? Mm-hmm. So what is going on new in your life? I just want to bring you on first, and just what is new since the last time you've really interacted with us, bro? You've been kind of in the background for a little bit, man. Now we see you. Now we see the face behind everything that CSG does, right? So what is going on, bro? How have you been? How's it going?
God has been good, brother. So I've got part-time job over at my local church, and so there's been a lot of interesting projects that have gone on over there, and so I've had an opportunity to be involved in that, and then day job just keeps me pretty busy. So but it's been good. God has been teaching me lessons, I feel like, every day on better ways to serve people, better ways to love people, and has given me an ample opportunity. And I feel like every time I get part of that right, then God looks down, he's like, oh, he got it. Now let's give him something else to do. Now, how about this challenge? Now, how about this rock? And if I can keep coming,
stacking, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
It does. Joshua Davidson, man, what is going on? How you been? What's new in your life? And how's the week been for you?
Well, what's new? I got a gas leak on my car, so that's going to be sitting for a minute.
Man,
like enough. You said, this is funny because I was just re-listening to our episode about depression. And one of the things that Noah said on there was, I was doing just fine. I found a nice church, and a week later I was in a wreck. Now I'm shopping for a car. It's like, yep. That's it.
Happens, man.
But this week has been all right. I finished, pseudo-finished a remodel project that I've been doing and cleared the room, and it's ready for a new floor this weekend. So our awesome floor guy, Willie's going to come in and put in a new floor. And then I got to pull an internet line or two internet lines in the office for the vice president of the organization. And then that room will be fully operable and he can bring his furniture in. So I feel accomplished. It's satisfying.
It's nice to feel that, right? It's just that sense of accomplishment. You've got something done. Now you can move on to the next thing. Kind of like what Noah was talking about. Once you've accomplished something, God said, all right, yep, he's got that. Let's move on to something else. It's that progress, right? It's that maturity. It's the progress of becoming more like Christ in just day-to-day life. That, I don't know, I just look back on at the end of the day and just think, you know what, even through the bad things that happen, there's still good in it. And even in the heat of it, let me get personal for just a second. Like, even whenever, just say me and my wife fight, right? Even in the heat of it, at the end of the day, before that sun goes down, we have made amends. And I mean, that's just, our routine, right? We have to make amends before the sun goes down. We don't want to give the devil an opportunity. And so before we even got married, that was one of our things that we decided to do, is if we ever got in a fight, then make amends before the sun goes down. And so whenever we do that, and I go to bed thinking, just looking back, even at that moment, I can still see God working, right? And there's still, so that just tells me I can, at the end of the day, I can say there's still good even in the bad, right? And so with that being said, we have an awesome show lined up for you all tonight.
Sir.
Atheism is going to be the topic. And we have with us our special guest, Dr. Braxton Hunter. And for those who don't know, he is the president of Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary, 45 minutes north of me, representing Indiana.
He's expecting your enrollment soon, right, Tyler?
Yeah, right. So no, definitely, we gotta catch up. But
I agree. I'm so pleased to be with you here, Tyler, and everybody else. And if you ever decide you want to go to Trinity, we'll fix you up.
Fair enough. So, man, I'll just give you the floor. Introduce yourself for those who don't know you, and just tell us, what is it about atheism exactly that really attracted you to that topic specifically?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. My most important credential is that I'm a servant of our King. That's the most important thing about me. And I think that should be said first and foremost. But it is true that I am in administration. I'm the president at Trinity College and Seminary, as you said. I also run the YouTube channel, Trinity Radio, which also exists as a podcast. People can find that by going to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Braxton Hunter. Why atheism? Well, I was the son of a megachurch pastor, and I didn't have any of the negative experiences that people usually associate with being the son of a big pastor. My parents were always real loving towards us and me and my brother, and didn't make us feel like we had to be, perfect all the time, like you would expect a pastor's son maybe feels like he has to be. Me and my brother aren't even named biblical names, but because my dad knew all these pastors that their children were Joseph and Mary and all that. Right. He didn't even want us to have that sort of pressure on us. He just wanted us to feel like we were normal church members, Yeah. And I picked up on this love for ministry and felt that God was leading me into the gospel ministry. And so I was a youth pastor, then a pastor. Then I went into full-time evangelism. Somewhere in the midst of all of that, and I'm trying to answer the question with brevity, but that's hard for those of us who speak for a living. But I had a friend from high school. I'd gone to a Christian school, and this friend began to experience same-sex attraction. And this led to a degradation in his faith to where he ultimately realized that if he was going to live a biblically consistent life, he had to reject the lifestyle that he was heading towards. He decided ultimately to reject biblical Christianity and embrace the lifestyle. And everything I've done since then, he now identifies as an atheist, and everything I've done really since then in apologetics has ultimately been to reach him. Hopefully God has used this to reach other people. And of course we have testimony of that, but that's why atheism was so strong on me, was because I saw people that I loved very closely walking away from the faith and embracing that position. And so that's why really, I guess, my ministry in apologetics has been for the past at least 3 years focused primarily on atheism.
Right on. That's hard to see somebody in your family. So perfect example is within my own church. We just had a daughter walk away claiming that, she now believes that she is a male and all of these different things. And so how did that, can I just ask you this? Just first and foremost, what was your initial response to that?
Probably not good. He knew it wouldn't be good from his perspective, but I was a younger guy at the time. I was pastoring at the time, but I was in my early 20s, and I probably didn't say the right things to him. Probably I said some things that were reactionary or overly aggressive in our conversation, because we were close friends. There was like a brotherly sort of wrestling around in the backyard sort of attitude with us. So sure, we got aggressive with each other, but looking back, I can think about those conversations, and there were a few hits by which, I said the right thing and God seemed to use that, but there were a lot of misses. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to learn how to do apologetics properly, because I felt myself, I didn't feel that my faith was rattled or that doubt was seriously affecting me as a result of hearing what he was going through. Yeah. But I wanted to give an answer that I didn't know how to give. I wanted to say something I didn't know how to say. And apologetics, the study of Christian defense, giving an answer, gave me, I think, what I needed to, that hopefully in the future those conversations went better than they did with him originally. Yeah.
Yeah, because see, what you're describing is kind of sounds like me and Josh, right? And if Josh, or if I were to walk away from the faith, I don't know how that would, or just to see Josh walk away from it, right? Like, I don't know how that would affect me, or somebody like that. Like, I don't know if it would shake my faith, or I don't know if it would probably give me the drive to, win these people back, right? And it's like,
really traumatizing, man. Yeah, that'd be really traumatizing for my spirit, like, in general. Like, the way that you phrased that, you said, if I were to walk away and what would happen to Josh, it's like, I would be traumatized, bro. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I have so much, like, I don't like, not necessarily investment, but I can't think of a better word. Like my emotions and my vulnerability that's been invested in you as a person, that would be really traumatizing for me. I can imagine, like, really.
All right. So, man, with that being said, then, so Josh, I know you had a question. We got a bunch of questions actually for you, Dr. Braxton. So Josh, if you want to, just go ahead and start off.
Just first and foremost, thank you for being here. I appreciate what you do. I've been watching Trinity Radio for, since it was a little after Pritchett was in the debate with Leighton, with the two Calvinist gentlemen on the stage with the wow. that whole episode, it was very recently after that I began to listen to Trinity Radio. So I remember when you guys weren't strictly doing the atheist thing. I remember that transition. I so deeply appreciate what the both of you do, just the candor, the way that you guys are able to play back and forth off of one another, and the way that you're able to still maintain a level of humility and empathy and sympathy for the people that you're talking to and about. And you make sure always to mention that this is not, when I'm disagreeing, I'm not talking about the person, I'm talking about the idea that the person is purporting. That's what I'm disagreeing with. And not all ideas are created equal. It's like, yeah, amen. But some ideas technically are better than other ideas. And we know that one of the things that's the purpose of apologetics is actually to not only argue and just disagree with somebody, but stage positively what it is that we believe and why in the world we believe it. So I guess the first thing that I would want to hear from you is, what is your favorite argument for God's existence? What is it? How would you explain it to the common man? And why is that your favorite?
So first of all, thank you for watching the show for as long as you did. I'm glad that you were introduced to the show by watching a debate that is widely considered one of the most civil debates. I think we all know that that's ever been. For those that don't know, that was a particularly fiery debate.
It was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, of course, over on the YouTube channel if anyone wants to check it out. But and what for those that don't know, what he's referring to is my co-host on Trinity Radio is a little bit snarkier than me, a little bit more straightforward. And oftentimes he says the thing that someone out in the audience is going, yes, somebody finally said it. And I'm here to go, Pritchett, now, calm down.
Right.
And so we have that good cop, bad cop sort of way about us. But so my favorite argument for God's existence, and this is going to sound totally like what people would expect apologetics junkies like me to say, but it's just true. And that is, I think that an argument for God's existence that is known as the Kalam Cosmological Argument. And the only reason I spelled that out is in case people that don't know want to research that. I have a video. We have a playlist, short videos playlist, and it explains it. But simply put, what we're talking about here, and I always tell people that aren't familiar with the argument, because I'm guessing from you guys that we expect there may be people in the audience who don't know what this argument for God really says.
For sure.
And so what this argument is trying to do, this is going to be the handrail that I'm going to give you right now, that if you start to get lost, just remember this handrail, because this is going to help you center yourself if you get lost. All we're really saying here is that God is the best explanation for the beginning of the universe. And I think that's something that at least kids growing up in a Christian family, and arguably people not growing up in a Christian family, can think of early on in their life. They think, well, both my daughters, when they were about 6 years old, they're different ages, but when they were both about 6 years old, they came to me and said, Daddy, I know there's a God. Oh, you do? Yeah. Well, because if there was no God, where'd all this stuff come from? Now that's simple. And that's even could be seen by people that want to argue against this argument as simplistic. And there's certainly more that can be said, but it's an argument that is simple enough it can be understood by a 6-year-old, and complex enough that philosophers can argue about it. But basically, here's how the argument goes. So everything that begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. So, and this seems intuitive to most people. I mean, you didn't decide to be born. Your parents did something that we're not going to talk about on this rated PG program that led to your being born. The same for them. The same for any particular thing that happens or begins to exist around you. When fireworks goes off, there's a reason the firework was shot up into the air. There's a causal chain. All right. That seems simple enough for people to understand. Everything that begins to exist has to have a cause. Then the second thing is the universe is like that. The universe began to exist. Now, this is pretty well borne out by modern science. Now, there are people that still argue against this, but generally speaking, it's accepted by most people that the universe began to exist. Now, when people challenge each of these things, believe it or not, people challenge these ideas. We have responses we give, but that's the idea. So everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe is like that. So the universe must have had a cause for its existence.
Right.
Now, that doesn't get you to God, right? And atheists are quick to point this out to us.
No,
but what it does is it shows you that the universe must have had a cause that wasn't the universe. The universe had to have a cause. And here is the difficult thing to explain. I've tried to explain this enough now that I've found where it's difficult for people to follow. So I've got an analogy. Am I going too long here, guys?
No. This is perfect, man. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you. So in my family, we like the Toy Story films. And I would wager that many of your listeners are familiar with the Toy Story franchise. Well, what if I asked you that who's your favorite character in the Toy Story films? I said, well, I think Woody is the best character. And I said, okay, well, who brought the Toy Story universe into existence? This digital animated universe, this world that exists only in the computer and on film, right? How did that come to be? What caused that to come to be? Well, what if I said, I think that Woody the cowboy, since he's the best character in the film, he's the reason those films came to be. Well, instantly that's ridiculous because Woody's in the film. He's one of the things we're trying to explain. Right. Woody can't explain it. Buzz Lightyear can't explain it. Slinky Dog can't explain it. So we know that someone outside of that universe, that digitally created universe, had to bring that universe into existence. Nothing in that digital world could be the cause of it because that's the thing we're trying to explain. Well, in a similar way, it's important, I think, to look at the universe like that. Nothing, just like nothing in the digital universe of Toy Story could cause it to come into existence. Something outside of that had to bring, directors, filmmakers, animators. In a similar way, the universe isn't made of Woody and Buzz and Slinky Dog or Mr. Potato Head. Our universe, the actual universe, is made up of generally three things: time, space, and matter, physical matter.
Right.
So what that means is whatever caused the universe to come into existence is not in time. We could call it timeless. It's not in space. It's spaceless. And it's not made of physical matter. So that's pretty good for a start, but there's other things we can know. The cause not only is spaceless, timeless, and not made of matter, but it also has to be sufficiently powerful to begin the universe. And we would say that it would have to be a mind, because there are reasons we could give for this, but very simply put, in a state of timeless nothingness, one would have to decide to create, to do something, to decide to create from nothing. So in just a few minutes talking, we have a spaceless, timeless, non-material, sufficiently powerful, exceedingly wise mind as the best explanation for the beginning of the universe. And that starts to sound a lot like what Jews and Christians have always thought about when they look at Genesis 1:1, and it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So obviously there's more there that would need to be unpacked, but I think the reason I love it is because even though it takes a few minutes to kind of let it sink in what we're saying, it is something that you don't have to have a lot of prerequisite science or philosophy to understand. Most of this you can access just by reasoning and thinking in your mind, yeah, that seems right. I think that's right. And you get to pretty quickly, okay, if the universe had to have a cause and it can't be the universe, well, then it was a spaceless, timeless, non-material, sufficiently powerful, exceedingly wise mind, or God. And so I love that argument, and I think it works pretty well.
Let me ask you this.
I mean, that's legit, man. That was a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh and I have been talking about the Imago Dei, like he said a while ago. Do you think that it's the Imago Dei within us that actually makes us question, where did I come from? Like, is that part of that? Like, we see practically? Or how would you explain that? Like, what makes humans question, where did I come from, and make us want to find out, how the universe began to? Because what you're talking about, Braxton, is that, this philosophy, and that people have thought about these things. We all think about them. But we all have this natural, and I'm going to say natural here, curiosity, right? Is that the Imago Dei? Yeah.
You put that really interestingly, and I like the way you phrased it. I've never quite heard it phrased. Is that why we search for God or curious about these things? So when I talk about the Imago Dei, in Genesis 1, here's how I get to what I think, because it's ambiguous. It's not that the Bible doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It's just that we don't get all the information about everything that we would like to get in the Bible. I always say angels. I'd like to know more about angels, but the only time we really find out about angels is when they show up in a story and do something. We find out something about them. I just wish the Bible told me more about angels, but it doesn't. And I wish it explained in more detail the Imago Dei. But here I think is a faithful way to get to what it is and what it means. So we're made in the image of God. That's what we mean by the Imago Dei. And when the way I think we can get there is to look at what is true about us that is true about God that is not true about the animals. So things that are true about us and God that are not true about the animals, because that's how you would separate out what is it that's unique about us. And I think you come up with several things pretty quickly. One thing you come up with is creativity. And curiosity is, in a sense, a cousin to creativity. And in a passage replete with God's creative act, like Genesis 1, I think that's an important thing. Now, some animals have demonstrated a certain level of creativity, but nothing like what humans have. Humans have a different kind of intellect. We can have thoughts about our thoughts. Now, my dog, Indiana, we named the dog Indiana, and my dog, Indiana, when I think he's just thinking food, pet, outside, and he's not even thinking those words, just impulses, really. But we have what's called higher order thinking. We think about our thoughts. What does it mean that I'm thinking about the fact that I'm hungry? Mm-hmm. Should I eat? Those are kind of thoughts that separates us. And of course, according to biblical revelation in Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, we find out that be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So our minds can be renewed in a way that animals, we have no reason to believe animals' minds can be renewed like that. So creativity, intellect, free will, I think if one believes we have free will or a robust understanding of free will, I think that's something we share with God that we don't necessarily share with the animals, because I do think it kind of requires higher order thinking. And of course, I believe this goes along with our minds being renewed. I think that we have souls that can connect to God. And so I think that those kind of things kind of inform what we understand about the image of God.
Yeah. This is something that's been standing out to us lately, Braxton, is this image of God concept that Tyler and I have really been trying to investigate more deeply, and in different kind of ways. We're really just pondering the best we can, and neither of us are scholars. And I've never been to college, so my grasp is limited. But I've been
listen, if you'd gone to college, it wouldn't necessarily mean your grasp of any of this would be any better. We're talking about weighty issues here.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, well, and I don't mean what I don't mean is that we're uninformed. What I mean is that I don't have a lot of maybe the formal language that would be used as the right tool to explain it. But I think what we've come to is that you described there are three things that the universe is made of. Those that, like, compositionally made of, right? But for the human person, there's something unique about the human person because of the fact that we're made in the image of God. I think there's a fourth thing the universe is made of, and that's meaning. And that's actually how we interact with the universe that we're in. And I think that's the most immediate way that we're in God's image, if that makes sense. For me,
are you saying that there's a purpose, that we have a divine purpose for our lives? Is that kind of what you're hitting at?
Well, yes, there's a purpose, but also there's it's like there's an ability to be in harmony with the intention God has for you, or to not be in harmony with the intention God has for you. And the way that we differentiate between those two things is one of value and meaning, not one of composition or anything that the universe is, quote, made of, right? But instead, we don't react with the matter. We don't react with time. We don't, like, those are not the things that we're interacting with when we live. We're re-interacting with meaning. And so it's kind of like the way that you describe those things that we have in connection with God that are not necessarily how the animals have. I don't believe that animals can perceive the kind of meaning that we're talking about when we live in the universe as human persons embodied, right? There's something unique about that. But it's kind of one of those things that for us has been standing out recently. And I think that's what you just mentioned and what Tyler just mentioned was kind of revelatory for me. That was really cool.
Well, yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. And with these things that I typically think of with the Imago Dei, I think the meaning is only possible because I agree with you. I don't think that my dog has a lot of philosophical thoughts about meaning or what God wants for his life or anything like that. He's just following impulses, but we do have meaning and a sense of meaning. And that's possible because of the higher order level of thinking we're capable of that God gave us. This soulish nature of us, I think that the free will is necessary for thinking about these things. So I think that you're talking about something that sits at the heart of what it means to have the image of God because of these things that I already would have listed, and maybe you've given me another one that I should list.
Well, I mean, cool, fair enough.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, cool.
Sure.
Josh is blown away right now.
Well, I really
can
am.
see it on his face.
Like the way that you
right?
guys both explained that, the way that landed for me was like it was like I was saying before, revelation. Like for me, that was revelatory. I feel like like you guys just pieces. Like pulled the veil off of something for me personally just now.
Well, cool. I'm glad. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Picking up the pieces, making the picture a little bit more clear, man. And that's really like what it's all about, honestly. And that's something for me personally with the Imago Dei, just, kind of camping on it for a little bit longer, because I would hold to, and not to get into like a debate or anything about it, but I would hold to Calvinism, right? And so for me to see people in the sense of, elect, non-elect, and it goes deeper than that, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, there is still that, right? There is still that ultimately, if you think about it. And so to shape how I, interact with people, because I do believe we are all created in the image of God. I do believe that is what sets us apart, whatever that means, whatever the image of God is in all of its entirety. I think that is what separates humans from everything else created, right?
I agree.
So with that, those people, those reprobate, right? They're still in the image of God. And so that has to mean something. You can't just throw that out. So for me personally, I'm reevaluating that. And I don't know, that's just kind of where I'm at, And so forgive me if I'm kind of stumbling through it. Like that's just where I'm at personally.
No, my understanding is that Calvin said that whoever you're talking, this is going to be a paraphrase. I'm a butcher Calvin here, but
yeah.
I worked that soundbite in somehow, but it's my understanding that he said something like, it doesn't matter if you're talking to a beggar on the street or a king. This is someone you should have a certain amount of respect for just based on they're made in the image of God.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's true. Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
Well,
yeah.
At the risk of this tangenting into Calvinism somehow, because I don't necessarily want that to, I don't want that to come in necessarily.
Well, hold on. Absolutely. First of all, you guys should know that one of my closest friends in the world is Chris State, who is a very well-known Calvinist.
Oh yeah,
and we talk all the time.
He's been on CSG before. Yeah.
Multiple times. Yeah. Him and Robert Wiesner, they debated.
Oh yeah.
Ross Burns, and then we've had Chris on to just kind of a one-on-one conditional immortality. Loved him, man. Love Chris.
Yeah. So I'm a friendly non-Calvinist. You don't have to worry. Pritchett's not here. Nobody's going to get hurt. My co-host.
See, so I would take that then. It was kind of predestined that his son's birthday this weekend.
That's right. Yeah, today.
That's right. So we invited Johnathan Pritchett to come on, but he had other things to do with his family, which, hey, totally understandable. But the next time you don't get that pass, so you can't use it.
Yeah,
no, I'm just playing, brother. I love you, man. But so, all right. So we have gotten off of atheism. So let's kind of get back on that track a little bit. Josh, you did send some questions, and I kind of want to camp on this one because this is interesting to me because of what we were talking about earlier, right? If Josh were to leave the faith, it would shake my faith, and I pray that would never happen, right? Because Josh is one of those people that, I mean, like he said, we've invested so much trust into each other. To see that just go away, right? Just one day, I mean, it would. I don't even know what it would do. But to piggyback on that now, kind of, is the first question Josh sent. What is the best atheist objection you've heard against the existence of God?
This may sound like the response you would expect if you're a person who's familiar with these discussions, but not all of our listeners are. I think the best argument that atheists have for the non-existence of God is what is called an evidential argument from evil. And so the problem of evil in general is something that Christians often think of on their own. I mean, atheists never had to raise this, because most Christians would think of it on their own. Why did God allow this horrible thing to happen? Whatever that thing might be. Why did he allow my child to die? Why did he allow Hurricane Katrina? Why Afghanistan? Why the Holocaust? These are things that I think should give Christians pause. I think we should stop and not be so cavalier and think about this deeply, because even if it weren't an atheist bringing an argument from that God must not exist because of all the evil in the world, that God would stop that, right? If he's all loving, all powerful, all knowing, he would stop that, and he could stop it. It's still there, so clearly God doesn't exist. I mean, that's basically the sense of those kind of arguments.
That's interesting.
And Christians will think of that on their own. They may not question God's existence right away, but they will think, why did he allow this to happen? So I think it's fair. And another thing about it is it's got a strong emotional punch to it.
Right.
Even though I currently am convinced we have solid intellectual answers to those that make sense of why God may allow pain and suffering to exist.
Yeah.
I still think it still bothers me emotionally, right? Even though I intellectually have what I think is a good explanation for that. So I'd say that, and what I said was the evidential argument from evil. So within that whole notion, there are atheists who will argue, therefore God does not exist. Because this evil stuff happens, therefore God doesn't exist. Okay. But the stronger argument makes a softer claim, and that is to say, okay, we can't say for sure God doesn't exist, but wouldn't you at least agree that the level of senseless suffering, gratuitous suffering, that's suffering without any obvious purpose that God could bring out of it or something, doesn't that at least lower the probability for you that such a God exists? I think that is a fair question. We have answers to them that I think are good enough that problem doesn't really bother me much anymore intellectually, but I think that's the best they have in their defense.
You know what's really interesting actually is that we had recently Tyler and I did an episode with JD Martin, and then it followed up with we also had Flowers on to follow up, JD and Flowers both, and we were talking about divine providence and exactly this, like the allowance, like what that means. And in more specifically, because JD and Tyler are both Calvinists, it was incorporated with the idea of decree and such things, and the allowance of freedom and what that would mean for me as a non-Calvinist, for Tyler as a Calvinist, and so on. But also in general, we kind of address those things often in what we're doing, because one of the things that we talk about a lot in the podcast is actually how to deal with sin, in our sin and the sin of other people when it hurts you, and drug addiction and depression and real, thick, hard to talk about, catch in your throat kind of topics. And that is basically the problem of pain, the problem of evil, like you just said. And it's not something that should be strayed from. I don't think that people should run away from it. They should look it in the face, because if you can't, it will overtake you eventually. You have to be honest with, I think that's, you're right. That's something that it does have an emotional punch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just to run down real quickly, because I'd hate for us to present a possible concern for people and then not give them some kind of an answer. I'll just say there are generally 4 answers that are given to this, and it's going to be some variation of these 4. And that is 1, character building. Some people say God created a world that he knew would have pain and suffering in it because experiencing pain and suffering builds our moral character and integrity. Well, I think that's certainly true in biblical Romans. I think Romans 5 actually talks about the fact that this can build our character, build us into better people. And that's true. We know that's true. We look at someone who struggles with cancer, or you yourself out there may have struggled with cancer and came out the other side an inspiration to other people.
Right.
And it makes us better to watch someone experience that we love. So that's one thing, but I don't think it's the whole picture. Then there is the heaven answer, which says, well, look, in some sense, what we're experiencing now is important to the kind of people we're going to be in heaven, right? And it's like it's building us into those kind of people. So it's kind of like the last answer, but also the emphasis is placed usually by someone who gives this answer is to say, look, there is a lot of pain, but this is only going to be a moment in light of eternity. And in eternity, we'll experience, no pain, no suffering, every tear from their eye, that sort of thing. So I think that's true too. I mean, the Bible does, we do hear about that. The third thing would be the Reformed answer. This would be and just because it's called the Reformed answer doesn't mean that Calvinists are the only ones who can give it. Calvinists are often considered part of a tradition called the Reformed tradition. And it also doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it if you're not a Calvinist. The Reformed answer basically wants to highlight the fact that God created a world that would have pain and suffering in it, but that he has a purpose for everything. And so whatever evil thing you want to bring up, whatever painful thing, so that just seems like there's no purpose for that. No matter how bad it is, and atheists are happy to detail how bad things can happen in this world and how bad they are.
Yeah.
But the Calvinist wants to say, and I would say, God has a purpose for that. And that would be a simple way of explaining the Reformed theodicy. And then the fourth answer would be one that some Calvinists would give, depending on your understanding of free will. Calvinists affirm free will. I'm sure Tyler affirms free will. It's just, what do you mean when you say free will, right? But let's set that aside for a minute and just say this. The free will theodicy says God created a world that he wanted man to experience free will. This is an implication drawn from Scripture, but I think there are passages that can't be understood without this. But I hope you understand, I'm also trying to bifurcate this from the whole discussion about Calvinism and just say, look, God wanted people to have real love, and that requires real freedom. That I would say. And even in the garden, you see there are two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil gets all the glamour, but you've got two trees there, right? And it's like every day they had to make a choice. Atheists will make fun of this. They'll say God set them up to fail by putting the tree there. I see it exactly the opposite. God is giving them the opportunity to make a choice every day. Are you going to love and obey me and give up what you could have for the sake of a relationship with me? Or are you going to choose self and serve self? And of course, that's what they ultimately chose. So the free will answer says the bad things that happen in this world, the pain and suffering, happen because of the free actions of man, or perhaps the free actions of angels and demons, we could say, but as a part of that. But that means that you can't lay it directly at the feet of God. And so I think all four of these answers give us a piece of the puzzle. And so I think that those are important things to keep in mind as you're considering this. But one thing I would say is, when I'm saying that moral pain and suffering and evil in this world that happens is the result of the free choices of people, I want to be clear to say that does not mean that for you personally, if right now you're going through a particularly difficult financial time or you have some illness or something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you did something that God is now punishing you directly.
Right.
It just means that the existence of sin and suffering and pain traces back to choices.
Yep. And yeah. Absolutely. I was stuck in that trap, I think. And to be honest, like, I kind of do get stuck in that trap sometimes. I think maybe we all do, right? But at the end of the day, I love what you guys are saying, because it's true. First and foremost, you have to have a balance, right? There is it's only free will. It's only God's sovereignty. It's both and. There is this point. And I really think God created it like that for what you were saying about character building. Regret, it's a good thing. Pain, it's a good thing, right? It can be a good thing. Why? Because it shapes and molds us, like you were saying. So having a combination of all of these different arguments, I think it makes a good argument. Not only a good argument, but it's actually what we see. It's actually what we experience. I can see through my drug addiction that I was going through. I promise you all, anyone going through a drug addiction right now, listening to this radio show, I promise you, you will go through hell. It sucks. But whenever you get through it, it's so much better, and you can see why you went through it. And I don't know, it's one of those things.
Praise the Lord, man.
Experience. It's one of those things you really have to experience to be able to just say, yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about, right? But at the end of the day, we're kind of ending where we began, so to say, even though we still got 20 minutes left. But at the same time, there is good in these things that happen. Even the worst argument, that if this really happened, because let's be honest, right? If an atheist gives us an argument, they're speaking to the emotions. They're going to speak to draw it out and make it just as horrible as it possibly can. First and foremost, if that were to actually happen to somebody, I could still look at them, and they came to me advice, right? I could still look at them and say, I agree, it's horrible. It's horrible, but God is working something. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. He knows what it is. But God, I can say that with confidence, to go to bed at night and know that that's true. God is working something good through that. And just to remind everybody just one more thing about what Romans 8 says. And no, not about Romans 8, 28 and 29, not 30. No. I want to go a little bit further past that. And I just want to read it just for anyone, like Braxton said. that's going through a rough time, that's going through trials, that's going through tribulations. Can I just start in 35 and just go to the end of the chapter? Who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will trouble or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? Paul's doing the same thing the atheist is doing. He's given the worst things that can possibly happen, right? Exactly. As it is written, for your sake, we encounter death all day long. We were considered as sheep to be slaughtered. They're not saying you're not going to, accepting Jesus as just puppies and rainbows. That's not what they're saying. They're saying expect a hard time.
They encounter death every day.
Yes.
Encountering death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I mean, our God is a great redeemer, and whatever evil is happening in the world, he can redeem it and bring something beautiful out of that situation. One of the common examples that's given, because it comes from a famous atheist paper by a guy named William Rowe, but they'll say, look, there are certain evils that just have no purpose. Like, and he comes up with a hypothetical that we can imagine happening, a lightning striking a tree and it falling on a deer and burning up and burning the deer. And he's like, look, this deer dies. There's no nutrients in the soil. It burnt up. There's no good that comes out of this. Well, hold on. You don't know the butterfly effect that 100 years from now may come about because of that event with that deer. You just don't, the only way you would know that there's nothing that can be redeemed and brought out of this that's good is you'd have to be God to know that.
You'd have to be omniscient. Yeah.
In which case God exists.
Fair enough.
He's arguing with me right now.
It's a win either way. Josh, you got anything else you want to say on that topic?
I was going to say, I could probably like piggyback off of that for like another hour, but I kind of feel like
easily. I
want to move on from the slow and the dredging, because we can talk about suffering forever, but there are some things that I think are probably a little bit more forwardly minded we could go over. So I kind of want to move on. The thing that I was going to ask you next is actually about as an apologist, because this is something that you do not only administratively through the college. You inform people who are going to be the leaders and authors and things like that for the next generation, right? But also we're going to be using that information, and the people that they reach are going to be using that information to reach others, and it's this rippling effect. And so you're in kind of a unique position, and so I'm kind of wondering what you think are some of the concerns in the realm of modern Christian apologetics that you see becoming a future focus in the near future, some things that maybe you see are on the horizon that are going to become more relevant.
The thing that comes most quickly to mind is consciousness. I just did a project on consciousness with my church that was a whole stage production. I saw
that.
It.
That was really rad, awesome. By the way. Good job.
Well, I appreciate that, guys.
The music was pretty cool.
Yeah, we actually have some really talented musicians at our church and in our community. But consciousness right now, Josh Rasmussen, who is probably the world's leading philosopher on contingency arguments, which is a type of argument for God's existence. He's focusing all his efforts on consciousness as an argument for God's existence and for the soul. He is an Oxford published scholar. That's going to be fantastic. And that's just been really hot right now, honestly, with worldview discussions. Even many atheists. There was a guy who responded to one of my videos who's a soap opera actor named Scott Clifton, and Scott Clifton said that's one thing that he thinks counts in favor of God is consciousness. It's just an amazing thing. So I think that's one thing. I think on a sciencey side of things, of course, that could be sciencey. But on the more sciencey side of things, I think issues related to quantum mechanics is going to be big going into the future. Does that in any way imply God? Of course, there's a well-known apologist named Michael Jones who runs a YouTube channel called Inspiring Philosophy.
Yes.
And he has an argument for God's existence that's based on quantum mechanics. So I think that's something we could see in the future. I think on the cultural side, issues related to human sexuality that's always been there, but with the acceptance of trans issues and things like that, I think that's going to continue, and abortion is going to continue to be a thing that on the social side, right, apologists are going to have to deal with. In terms of the arguments, I think, like I said, consciousness and quantum physics, and then also just the arguments that have stood the test of time for over 1,000 years, like the one that we discussed at the beginning of the show.
That's kind of what I wanted to go to, if you guys don't mind, because atheism, is it a relatively new thing? Is this just enlightenment, or do we look back in history and actually see atheists? I caught an article a while back, it was a long time ago, forget if I can find it, I'll link it in the description, but it was basically an argument that said, no, atheists have always existed, right? And it wasn't an enlightenment thing. So is there truth to that, or is atheism as a movement, as a whole, is it new? And what does that mean that we don't see that in history?
It's not new in the sense that I think there probably were atheists at each major division, at least going back, 2,000 or 3,000 years. Those people existed, but it wasn't a movement, and it's difficult to say, really, because as you guys probably know, early Christians in the early church were referred to as atheists and cannibals. Right. Cannibals because of our view, because of a misunderstanding of communion, what some people would refer to as the Lord's Supper. It sounded like we were literally eating someone's flesh and blood, right? And so we were cannibals, but we were also atheists. Why are we atheists? We believe in a God, right? Yeah, but you're atheists because you reject all the other gods. So in that sense, it's almost like, almost like what they say today, right?
Yeah. Polycarp's story is my favorite in church history. I love whenever he points to the Roman, they say down with the atheists. Look to the Christians, say down with the atheists. And he points to the Roman legion, he says down with the atheists. It's like, yes. The ultimate mic drop moment in church history.
Yeah, and what a death he had as a martyr, if that story is correct. And I think we have good reason to believe that it is. So that's what I see coming down the pipe, I think.
Right. Interesting. So I think I agree with you. Mostly what I think is going to be probably coming down the tube is something like a larger emphasis on understanding and answering sexuality problems, but also understanding the problem of consciousness and emergence and that kind of thing. And when you mentioned Michael Jones, that actually reminded me that his argument is basically that the universe is made of information, and that I said the universe is made of meaning. And so I think that's probably an interesting overlap there. And I'm saying that as a storyteller, not as a physicist. And so I think that's kind of a cool thing that has such an overlap. Is really great depth there. But I think consciousness is probably the thing that will be, for the Christian, the thing that becomes like, look, do you not understand? Like you can't put enough Legos together to get a mind. Like it doesn't work like that. Right. Material composition doesn't make consciousness. It doesn't. That doesn't work. Something else is at play here. And so I think that's really, that's a really powerful emphasis. I hope that we learn more about consciousness. I'd be excited because I also have a really great interest in psychology. And so, it's very interesting for me.
And I should say about the human sexuality issue, anyone who considers them a part of the church, you consider yourself a believer in the one true God, you're trusting Jesus for your sins, you've repented of it, you're a biblical Christian, you're going to try to do what the Bible says. If that describes you, in my opinion, and of course I could be wrong, the thing that is going to make Christianity appear completely unacceptable in the coming years is issues around human sexuality and biblical teaching on human sexuality. And there's going to be a strong effort, if you're a listener out there in a car or at home, there's going to be a strong effort to get the Christian church to reject that teaching in Scripture and soften up on those issues. And of course, the progressive church is doing that right now. Don't do it. If you believe what the Bible says, believe what the Bible says. To be a Christian at base must mean you want to believe what Jesus believed. And Jesus believed the Old Testament.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Paul, of course, mentions it in Romans and 1 Corinthians, right?
The Old Testament and the New, right? 1 Corinthians 6, Revelation. There's a list. There's a literal list of people who are not getting in heaven, and homosexuals is on that list. I mean, it's not that we're trying to hate. It's that we're trying to love and tell you guys, if you continue in this lifestyle, you'll go to hell. That's what it boils down to. And so we love you, and we want, we want the best. We really do. So speaking on that, I wasn't expecting that, but I'm glad that we went there. So thank you guys for that. Noah, you've been super quiet, and I want to give you, since we're winding down, I want to give you a last opportunity to kind of speak what's on your mind. You've listened to this discussion.
Noah.
What
Bring it.
You got, man?
Part of the discussion. Had to step out there for a minute.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If I can, Doctor, tell me the story of how you came to Christ. What got you to this place to where you feel passionate about going on the internet, talking about these things, running your YouTube channel, and coming on and doing guest appearances?
So my salvation testimony is basically, as I said at the top of the show, I was raised in a mega church environment. My dad was a pastor of a church of 5,000, and I was there through the building program, this big new building and all of that. And when I was about 5 years old, and I realize that's very young, but at 5 years old, I went into the pastorum, the church, the house the church had for us to live in. Mm-hmm. I went into my dad and I said, Dad, I want to be a Christian. I want to repent of my sins and trust in Jesus. And he said, well, let me ask you this. Do you know who Jesus is? And he knew I did. Mm-hmm. And I explained it. He said, do you know why Jesus died on the cross? I said, yeah, he died for my sins. Now I couldn't have broken down atonement theory or anything, but I understood that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he said, well, then in my opinion, you know everything you need to know. And if you're feeling an urging to come to me and talk about this. So I prayed my own prayer to ask Christ to forgive me of my sins. And I repented of my sins to come into my life, save me. I believe that God raised Jesus from the dead. I did all that right there on this brown shag carpet in Florida. And then that very day was baptized. Now I have to say, a few years later, Noah, my dad, I guess I was 10 at this point.
Okay.
And my dad was preaching somewhere and I just felt compelled to leave the auditorium. And I got alone at 10 years old. And I said, Lord, I don't know if I was really saved when I was 10 years old. Or 5 years old. I don't know if I understood enough. I don't know. In case I didn't, I just wanted, if I've never given my whole heart to you now, I'm giving it now. I repent of my sins. And so to this day, honestly, I think probably I really got saved when I was 5 years old. But if that's not the case, I know I nailed it down at 10.
And and when you came back, as you went through life, did you have opportunities or experiences to where people challenged that faith? And did you have answers for as you come across? I mean, obviously, if you're debating atheists now and giving presentation, obviously you've kind of mastered that. But was there a rough spot where you struggled with your faith or struggled with answering some of those questions?
Sure. I've moved on several doctrinal issues within Christianity, but above and beyond that, as I may have said earlier in the show, initially when my close friend began to spout atheist sort of stuff to me, it rattled me, but not in the sense that I had doubt. It rattled me that I wanted to give an answer I didn't know how to give. Unfortunately, I was a pastor from the age 20, and that's probably too young for me to have been pastoring, but I don't think I heard anything. But I was I just kind of picked this up from people that if you're a pastor, then you need to be able to thump the pulpit and say, thus saith the Lord, even if you don't know what the Lord thus saith about something. Well, that is destructive. That's how cults begin, right? That's not what you do. But there were years where I studied enough that I had probably the answers related to the sermons I was preaching. But these bigger issues out there were still hanging there. And it wasn't until I took a deep dive into some Christian defense. And in fact, I'll just encourage anyone out there, just if you want to know how to defend your faith, I say pick up Case for Christ as a place to begin. It's just not that difficult to understand.
Yeah, Lee Strobel.
Yeah. Starts with the resurrection. You can watch the movie with your family. I think that's great. And it wasn't until I started digging in that I really got to that point. Yeah.
Braxton, we got about 20 seconds left. Where can people find you if they love this discussion so far? They want more Braxton Hunter. Where can they find you at?
So my personal website is braxtonhunter.com. And there's also the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Braxton Hunter. And then our school is trinitysem.edu. We have a lot of people who just take it just as lay church people want to go further in studying that. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for chilling out with us, man. It's been a pleasure. We will see you guys next week with Tim Stedman to talk about giants, Nephilim. Should be an interesting discussion. We'll see y'all next week. Good night. God bless and stay safe.